Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Excuse me guys, allergies starting to come in again. I don't know why. But let's go ahead and get started with this build. So this is my Sorc hybrid DPS build. I call it the Storm Raider. You can call it whatever you want. I just call it that. But let me go a little bit over this real quick so people understand a few things. One, I can't do great DPS rotations, guys, so the most I've been able to pull with this thing is 22k, and it was probably the best rotation I've gotten with it. In other content, I can't really allocate how much DPS it does because I haven't done a lot with it. I haven't had a chance to really test it. So I want to be clear on that. But let's go ahead and take a look at this thing. As you can see, this is a Wood Elf. Now, Dark Elf is much better for this. A lot better combination for this in the sense of how well you can make it work. But as you can see, we do have a 27k Magicka, 17k health, 27k stamina. We do have decent recoveries. You don't really need to focus much on recoveries in the PvE side as much as you do in PvP, because you have a lot of ways to get resources in PvE. You have, you know, shards, you have potions, you have synergies, you have all kinds of things that you can get resources from. And with this build, you don't have very many resource issues at all. So as you can see, we do have a 3,000 spell damage with a 3,000 weapon damage. We do have a 41% spell critical with a 44% weapon critical. We do have a 12,000 spell resistance with an 11,000, almost 12,000 physical resist. And then moving down here, we are using Pelinals and the Twiceborn Star with this. So we do get that equivalent weapon spell damage, and then we get the options for 2 Mundus Stones. I really like this because I can use the Lover Mundus Stone, which you guys can see gives me 3,784 penetration, which makes it really good for me. I also have the Thief Mundus Stone, which increases my weapon and spell critical strikes by 2,180. And then I have major proficiency because I do have the inner light on both bars, and then of course we are using the dual stat food for max magic and max stamina, and I'll show you that real quick what it looks like. Right here, grapes and Ashiam falafel. This gives you both magic and stamina at 4,936 for 1 hour, so almost 5k magic and stamina. I really can't wait until they make a purple food of this and a gold food of this, which hopefully will come sometime in the near future. Next up, we are using the Warrior Elixir, but this is actually called Stamina Essence Potion on the live servers, and it gives you 7,000 stamina back. It also grants Major Endurance, which gives you 20% stamina recovery. It also gives you Major Brutality, Major Savagery, increasing weapon damage and weapon critical. And as you guys can see, this thing lasts for 41 seconds because we do have CP set up correctly. Or not our CP, our passive set up correctly. So now, moving on to the gear. Now you can use Dama House with this, and as you can see, it's going to give you greater Magicka and stamina, but it's not as effective in the long run. And I'll explain why. The Sorc plays a lot different than the DK or as a Templar. And Dama House doesn't really play well with those, or with it. With the Sorc, I find Stormfist to be a much better combination. As you guys can see, this gives you extra stamina recovery, which plays well with Pelinals, but it also gives you the 2-piece item bonus. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a Thunder Fist to crush your enemies, dealing 2,062 shock damage every second for 3 seconds to all enemies within 4 meters. And the final hit hits for 10,000 physical damage when the fist closes. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. And let me tell you guys, this thing's going off every 8 seconds. So it's a really powerful set. Now, as you can see on this, we are running all divines on our gear. I'm going to go over this Palinals here in a second. We are running all divines. Or sorry, we should be running divines on the smaller pieces, infused on the big pieces. Unless you want to run all divines, you can, but it does lower your pools to 26k, and you really don't want that. So this gives you a little bit better if you have the infused, with this being infused as well. You don't get as much penetration on it as you would like, but it still works out in the long run. And it's a great combo. And Palinals is really great with this. It gives you, with a 2-piece max health, 3-piece stam recovery, 4-piece magic recovery, and then your spell and weapon damage become the highest of 2 values. So basically, whatever you have higher, so if you're using a lot of spell damage, your weapon damage is going to match. If you have a lot of weapon damage, your spell damage is going to max. And it doesn't matter. So if I use like a power pot, like I am, the green power pot, it's going to give me higher weapon damage, 20% more. That's going to apply to both my weapon and spell. So it affects both either way. So it's a really good set for hybrids. The next set we're using is another really good set for hybrids, which is Twiceborn Star. And Twiceborn Star happens to be one of the best sets for hybrids because of the max health, stamina, and magicka. That plays well into the combination of having those mixed stats. With having the extra health, though, you can reach a good health pool without any food requirements. As you can see, 17,559, and that's with our CP, all that kind of stuff spread out. Really, really good combination here. Like I said, if you're a Dark Elf, you can go all Divines on this gear and still break 27,000. You can almost reach 28,000 magic and stamina with this build. So really good combination there. Now, if you look here, we are using all weapon damage, but our jewelry is kind of different. We do have an infused necklace with weapon damage, and then on our other two we have arcane and robust. Since we have jewelry crafting, we can change the traits. So I changed the traits of these two to robust and arcane to give us a little bit more magicka and stamina. But it still didn't give us quite what we needed, so we had we couldn't do the infused here like we could with the hybrid build with the Dark Elf. If you're using a Dark Elf, you can drop this and go with the 2 infused here as well. That'll give you a lot more weapon damage, but this works out fine either way. Moving on to the weapons, we are using a Nirnhoned axe with a charged enchant on it because we do get greater damage benefits from using shock damage or physical damage. So being a Sorc, that's kind of what you want. In our offhand, we're using an infused dagger with a weapon damage enchant. This gives you increased weapon and spell damage, but that 452 only applies to our weapon damage, so it builds that up a lot, and it makes our spell damage equivalent. So we usually end up with about a 4,050 weapon spell damage without like spell power cure. With spell power cure, we actually go to like 24, 2,500 or 4,500 spell damage, which is really nice. We are using a lightning staff on the back bar with infused with a shock enchant. You can use whatever you want here. You can use a fire staff, you can use a lightning staff, you can use a resto staff, you can use pretty much anything. I like the lightning staff because I am a Sorc and I like getting that shock damage benefit. I'm never very much on the back bar anyways with this build because I really don't need to be. You can also use dual wield on the back bar, or you can use a bow. So you don't really just need a lightning staff, you can use any combination. So now moving on to the skills. You want to make sure you get all your class passives because you never know, you might use some skills, change some skills around if you don't like this setup to fit you more to your playstyle. Moving on, dual wield. I do have a lot of dual wield abilities unlocked because I do utilize some of them in certain situations. So I do have a lot of those unlocked. Always get your passives though for any of the weapons you're using. Armor side, light armor, top 3. And you will want those top 3 passives medium armor, you do want all the passives, and then with heavy armor, you do want the top 3 passives again. World skills, you can be a vampire with this, which is nice because it does give you that extra 10% stam recovery and magic recovery, which plays well with this build. The other nice thing with this build is we do get to utilize soul magic, and we'll get to that when we get to the skills. Fighters Guild, you want all the passives. Mages Guild, you don't really need many, you just need Persuasive Will and Magicka Controller, and Persuasive Will is only for questing anyways. Psijic Order, you can use Psijic Order abilities. As you can see, I was using Crushing Weapon with this. And what I did was I swapped out this ability, Shrouded Daggers, and I put this in its place. Because this is kind of like something you can spam, in a sense. Like, you activate it and apply it. Activate it and apply it. Activate it and apply it. So you activate it, heavy attack. Or light attack. Activate it, light attack, light attack. You're just constantly activating light attacking with it, and you're just keeping that cycle. It's kind of a nice ability, but I noticed that I didn't get as much DPS with this as I did with using the setup I have now. Moving on to Undaunted. Passives, you want them both. And then on to the racials. Wood Elf skills, you want all the passives, no matter what race you're playing with this. I play a Wood Elf Sorc on live, so that's why I made it a Wood Elf. And then onto the crafting. Alchemy, medicinal use, really awesome. And then, of course, provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. Definitely well worth the things. Now we're going to go over the skills. So starting with the first skill, we do use Rending Slashes. This does damage up front, like greater damage up front, and then damage over time. Next, we have Shrouded Daggers. This just basically does damage, but it hits multiple targets. Hits a total of 3. And then we use Deadly Cloak for a damage over time kind of effect, but it also gives us that 25% damage reduction from area of effect. And then next one is an Execute. This is Mage's Wrath. So what this does is this one calls lightning down, shocks the enemy, but it also has, if the enemy falls below 20% health within 4 seconds, an explosion deals an additional. So if the enemy falls below 20% health within 4 seconds, an explosion deals an additional 9,000 shock damage to them and 3,300 shock damage to other nearby enemies. Now I do want to show you guys this really quick. So when you're buffed up with this, this actually does a little bit more damage on the explosion side, which is kind of nice. And I just wanted to show you that. So this, even though it says it's a magic ability, because we get that greater magic damage, it does apply to that. So next up, Inner Light. This gives you increased max magicka by 5%, but because we have the Mage Guild magicka controller, it actually takes us up 7%. Next on our bar is Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now, Flawless Dawnbreaker gives us 5% weapon damage. It's also a great damage over time ability. But that 5% also gets increased to 8% because we do have the passive for the Fighters Guild that gives us an extra 3% weapon damage. And then moving to the back bar, we have Trap, or Rearming Trap, which is a damage over time thing. It also allows you to get Minor Force for 12 seconds in total, which is really nice because that's just extra damage. That Minor Force applies to both critical damage for both magic and physical, by the way. Next up, we have Lightning Flood. Now, Liquid Lightning's nice, guys. It's great for more, like, smaller group stuff. But this covers a 6-meter radius, so it's really good for AoE damage. And it does the same amount of damage. It's also a great synergy. The next ability we have is Blockade of Storms. Now this is mainly here for setting enemies off balance that might be concussed. And this can concuss enemies. Plus your shock staff or your shock glyph on your staff can apply concussed. And the shock enchant on your melee weapon can apply concussed. So that's why you want that, is so that when you hit this Blockade of Storms you get that off balance. The next ability can be used in one of 2 ways. You can use either morph, the lightning morph or the lightning damage morph or the physical damage morph. And I chose the physical damage morph, Hurricane. Now, Hurricane does damage over time, and it grows to 150% more damage in a 9-meter radius starting at 5 over 15 seconds. So this thing does a lot of damage, builds into a lot of damage. On top of that, it does grant you major ward, major resolve, increasing spell and physical resistance by 5,280, and also minor expedition, increasing your movement speed by 10%. Now, you can take the lightning morph on this, and it will give you 20% movement speed and damage over time, shock damage-wise. So either one's good. Next, we have Enter Light, again, to increase our max magicka and spell critical. And then, last but not least, we are using Shatter Soul. Shatter Soul is an amazing ultimate ability. One, it does a lot of damage to the enemy. If the enemy dies, the Shatter Soul explodes and deals 10k damage to nearby enemies. So it's a really good one to use in trash encounters. Like, I don't use Dawnbreaker in trash encounters, I use Shatter Soul. Because I can just rip through enemies, watch that thing explode, and it does a lot of damage. Also, this thing only costs 85 ultimate. So it's really cheap ultimate. It is a channel. It is a 3-second channel. So the best thing to make sure you do is make sure you have most of, if not all, of your AoEs on the back bar recently activated when you do this. And then once you get done with that, you can just swap bars and go through your rotation on the front bar. So that's the skills and abilities and the gear of this. Now let's check out the CP. Starting with the red tree, we have 66 in Ironclad, reducing damage taken from direct damage attacks by 22% with 66 points. We have 52 in a thick skin, reducing damage taken from damage over time effects by 19%. We have 66 in a hardy, reducing physical, poison, disease damage by 13%. And then 66 into elemental defender, reducing flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 13%. This is overall really good for this kind of build, to have that good mitigation of damage reduction. Moving on, though, we have 56 in a Warlord, reducing break free cost by 20%. We do have 23 in a Sprinter, reducing our sprint cost by 14%. And then over here, we have 43 in a Mooncalf, increasing your stam recovery by 10%. 43 in Arcanus, increasing magic recovery by 10%. And then 43 in a Tenacity, increasing stamina and magicka return of your fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. We also have 40 into Tumbling, reducing dodge roll cost by 16%, and then 2 into Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 1%. Now, I gotta ask why I did this with the hybrid, why I only put 2 points in here to give me 1%. The hybrid build doesn't use a lot of stamina a whole lot of the time, so you can use a chunk of stamina to block. It's okay. It's not gonna affect your build or your play at all. Just don't stand and hold block. Moving on, we have 37 in Elfborn. This increases our critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 15%. Now remember, we also have that minor force. So we actually go up to, excuse me, to a 35% or a 25% critical damage, which isn't that great, but it's pretty good. It's 5% off of what you would have, 5 to 7% off from what you would have at a standard DPS. We also have 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage done by 10%. Since we're a Sorc, we get 10% or 5% extra shock damage. So that 5% plays really well with this. The other race that works really good for this, besides like a Dark Elf, is a High Elf. So, because they get 4% more shock damage. And then moving on, we have 15 into Spell Erosion. This just gives us extra penetration to do more spell damage. Moving on to the middle tree, we have 23 into Master at Arms, increasing our direct damage done by 10%. And then moving on to the last tree, the Ritual, we have 37 into Thaumaturge. This increases our damage over time with damage done with damage over time effects by 15%. It's not quite where I would like it, but it's still in a good spot that gives you a really good amount of damage over time. The next ability we have is, or the next thing we have is Precise Strikes 37. This increases critical damage and critical healing done with stamina abilities by 15%. Again, 5 to 7% trade-off isn't bad. And then moving on, we have 15 and a piercing, increasing physical penetration by 14 to 65. Very similar to, you know, just like the magic aside, just to give us that extra pin to make it to where we do more damage. This also gets us closer to that pin cap that you need to be at for resistances. 43 in the Mighty, increasing your physical, poison, disease damage done with by 10%. Most of the abilities you use on this build are shock or physical damage. So you get that 5% added on top of that, which is a 15% increase. So really good damage overall with this build. Actually, it does a lot more damage than you might think, but with a Dark Elf it does more, and with a High Elf it does even more, because you get a 19% increase in shock damage, which is amazing damage with the shock side. And even with that lower Magicka, it turns out to be pretty good. So yeah, see, it is pretty fun, and I do enjoy this build. This is by far one of my favorite builds for the hybrid, because I love Sorc hybrids, and Storm, like the whole idea of the Storm Raider was just really cool sounding, and it really fits my playstyle. This does right here, but unfortunately I'm not going to be playing this exact setup on live when I get it done on live. This is going to be the character I'm going to be playing hybrid on live, is my Wood Elf Sorc, and I'm actually going to be using the Storm Fist, this particular setup with the 27 on both sides, and I'm going to use something a little different when it comes to the rest of the build. I do plan on setting it up the same way with gear, stats, all that kind of stuff, but when it comes to what weapons I use, I am going to be using dual wield on both bars, because this is going to be up close and personal build, just DPS purely. So I have a really cool setup for it already on live, because I've already started changing it on live and getting it set up. I don't have the Pelinals and not Shacklebreaker, but Pelinals and the other one. Shacklebreaker is another set you can use for this, but if you do that, you don't have the Lover Mundus Stone, so you have to put more into penetration, and that really sucks, because then you have to use Sharpened on the front bar in the offhand. Or, it's the offhand, and then in your main hand you're going infused. So you do lose more weapon and spell damage, but it's okay, because you do wind up getting a little bit better penetration with that, so you can play at the end game a little easier. Alright, but that's pretty much it, guys. That's the Storm Raider. If you guys like this build, you can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or other videos by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.